This episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast is brought to you by BetUS.
Joining me now on the Knicks Film School Podcast, returning guest, although it's been a hot minute. We'll get to that in a second. He's everywhere. He's been a very busy man lately, as we're going to get into shortly. And it's great to have him back on the show of Fanatics, Kazeem Famuyide.
Hey, how you doing, buddy? I'm doing good, man. How you been? It's been too long. It's been a long time.
So before you hopped on, I asked Andrew because I remembered the last time we had you on. It was with Monica.
Yes,
McNutt, of course, and I was in my laundry room because that's where I used to record podcasts from at my old house, and we were doing it on Zoom. But I didn't remember when it was, and Andrew informed me that it was during the We Here season. So it's been like a solid 3.5 years.
It has to be, yeah. This was when we were doing press for MSG AM at the time, and I remember you were one of the first interviews we did out of that show, out of that press run. So it was good. It's good to be back, man. It's been too long. I still watch. I still support. I see every episode, so at least clips of every episode. Not the whole joy. I'm not going to be that.
All thanks to Andrew. He puts out all those clips. I have nothing to do with any of that other than trying to sound semi-intelligent in front of this microphone.
Well, you sound more than intelligent. Give yourself some credit. You do this pretty well, man. There's a handful of like Knicks content creators that I don't miss with, and you're in the short list of those guys. So
I'm honored. 1, 2, fake it till you make it, and I'll just leave it at that. You don't need to fake anything because you are talk about a man in demand. We'll get to Knicks stuff in a bit, but you have been talking about making the rounds lately. I don't know which of these I want to hit first because, again, talking about the last time we were on together, I think Jalen Brunson was in Dallas. Josh Hart was maybe still in New Orleans. Maybe he was a Laker. I don't even know.
I think he was in New Orleans. I want to say he was in New Orleans because
New Orleans probably that makes sense. And like Ben Stellar was still kind of in hibernation as a Knicks fan. Like he was here and there, but it wasn't the presence he is. And you were on stage with all of these guys, of course, at Fanatics Fest, which took place recently, along with some other notables. I think Spike was up there as well. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Claude Frazier. Yeah. That was the quintet up there.
I have to say this. The Bing Bong Panel. Was that your idea, or did somebody else bring that to you for approval?
That was not my idea. But to be fair, we did have Gorilla Nems introduce us, so the Bing Bong was well earned to put in that show. So it was a good time.
There's definitely a subset of Knicks fans who like loathe the Bing Bong. I'm pretty indifferent. I whatever. It's fine if people want to still go with it, but it is what it is.
It definitely. There was a point where I was probably in that pool of people like, all right, we got to stop with the Bing Bong. But at this point, it's just like, okay, like I'm indifferent. I'm the same way. It's like, love it. I'm not the most hating of it like I used to be, but I think it's the test of time. We're all right.
So talk to me about this because I think this is such a cool thing. When I first heard about the Fanatics Fest, I was very intrigued. I didn't really know what it was going to turn out to be. I had no earthly clue that it was going to be the monster that it was, where you couldn't. I mean, you look on social media for like a week straight, and every piece of content you saw was coming out of there. When did you like first hear about it? How did obviously you're involved with Fanatics, but take me a little bit through, and then we'll talk about maybe the actual panel if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, so I initially signed a deal with PointsBet about a year and a half ago, right in the middle of a season, 2 seasons ago. And PointsBet was initially bought by Fanatics. So I was, got swept into the Fanatics Sportsbook sort of pile and just doing our daily show, just, giving like takes throughout the NBA. And, I started to hear about, Fanatics Fest. I want to say right around this past April during WrestleMania week. So I was down there. Funny enough, like it connects all of my passions at one time.
I was about to say, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm down at WWE World doing our show, the Masked Man show for the Ringer wrestling show feed. And, we had a bunch of live interviews with AJ Styles, Dom Mysterio, all these WWE stars. And, Fanatics is such a big company. A lot of times, like, you don't even, like, meet people that work with you for, like, days, months, on end. So in the midst of us doing this live show, I meet a guy named Cody the backer, and Cody was just like, man, you're killing it over here. Like, what else do you do? I was like, yo, actually, I do the Fanatics Sportsbook app, NBA content. He was like, that is you. So we initially connected, and as we're doing WWE World, he's like, yo, listen, we're planning this thing called Fanatics Fest at Jacob Javits Center this summer, and it's going to be like the biggest thing ever, and you got to be involved in it. And I said, Cody, whatever you need, bro, I want parts. Right. And so initially, I was there to kind of run it back what we did with WWE World, with a lot of people saw, which the live wrestling interviews, one being with CM Punk and the other one being with Drew McIntyre on Sunday. But, you know, as I'm hearing word about this Knicks panel that we're doing, I was like, hey, man, if you guys need anybody to sort of like help run point of this thing, like, let me know. And to Cody's credit, he, kept me in mind up until about, I want to say 2 to 3 weeks ago now. I want to say 3 weeks ago, as this panel was already announced. And I think initially it was just supposed to be Ben Stiller, Josh Hart, and Jalen Brunson. And as it gets closer, like, we get Spike, and then we get Clyde. And Cody hits me and is like, I'm going to pitch you to kind of like moderate this thing and see how people feel about it. And to his great credit, the person who put me over the hardest was Ben Stiller. And he was like, yo,
really?
Yeah. So Ben was awesome. We're doing this panel, but I don't really know how to like run this thing, like run pointers. So they run it past them for me to sort of host the thing. And Ben Stiller was the most complimentary out of everybody. He was like, yo, I love Kaz. Like, I've been watching him for however many years on the network. So like, it was his word that kind of like got me on that stage. And it was just kind of a blur at that point, right? Like, it was, I told people, wholeheartedly, it was the first time I was literally ever nervous for anything in the industry, right? Because either one of these people getting a one-on-one, that's a great night, right? But
sure, yeah.
Having all 5 of them at once with like, thousands of people watching you on stage and however many people watching at home, like, it was the first time I was like, oh God, this is kind of going to be a big thing. So, and on top of the fact of how big Fanatics Fest was getting as the week sort of came on. And but it was extremely fun. Everybody was awesome to be around. Everyone's in good spirits. Like, thankfully, I had a good relationship with Clyde for a number of years, and Ben's been really nice to me. And, it was my first time really sitting and chatting with Jalen and Josh. So like, that was really cool. And and Spike I've known since my Source Magazine days. So like, it was all kind of like pretty familiar, but at the same time, it's like, man, Jalen Brunson was just named captain. Like, it's going to be in New York. The whole sports world's here. So it was really fun though, man. I truly enjoyed it.
I got to gas you up for a second, because to do that job, that moderation well, from my vantage point at least, you need to be, because it's Fanatics Fest, the whole theme of it is it's for the fans, all about the fans. So you need to be a man of the people, and which you are, right? and you that vibe comes through in everything that you do, which is one of the many reasons you're so popular. But you also need to know what you're doing, and like, you need to have had a lot of reps, because again, like you said it, not me, with that star power up there, I could see it be very easy to let that wash over you and kind of lose your way as you're trying to steer this massive ship. And I'm happy you got a chance to do it, but like, I can't think of many people that would have been better served doing it.
Man, I appreciate that, dude. I was truly, I wouldn't say I was nervous the whole time. I think once I got the crowd out there, and
I was about to say, was there a point where maybe you're like, okay, we're here. It's like you settled in almost?
Yeah, like, what made it really nervous, and people who were there will tell you, it was supposed to start around like 2:45, and we were like running like a half hour late. So like, as I'm already like jazzed up to go like hit the stage and like get this going, we're like all just standing there backstage, just like waiting for this to happen. And the telltale sign of like the worst thing that happened like during the stage show is a bunch of people standing and looking at a panel with a flashlight. And that's like never a good sign. So we're like, yo, is this even going to happen? But thankfully things got fixed. They worked it out. And I think all that time just standing around, like the nerves just sort of went away. And as soon as the crowd was still hyped and nobody had left and everybody was still sort of there, it all just became fun after that.
I want to get your thoughts on, like, so there's this thing that happened, obviously, and it again, it's kind of trying to do something that had never been done before as far as a fan experience. And I thought it was so perfect that Jalen and Josh were a part of this, because I'm always thinking about, like, where is, I don't even know if I should call it media at this point, but where is content heading?
Yeah.
And like, they are now two of, I mean, quite literally dozens of podcast hosts that are either current players or recent, former players. You look at Shaq, you look at KG, guys like that. And I feel like this is an evolving thing that is continuing to change as it goes along. And I personally, I'm always curious where it's going. And like, you're at the forefront of a lot of this because you have your hands on a lot of different things. And I'm curious what that part of it was like for you. Like, you are interviewing them, but they're also guys that are like kind of doing a little bit of what you've been doing too, and like what a lot of us are out here trying to do. Like, so what are your thoughts on that? I'm curious.
I mean, I think it's dope, man. Like, I think everything as far as like content creation is all about access, and if the people that are always, yeah, exactly. So like, if the people that are the topics of conversation are at the point where they want to take back that access and sort of like put it through themselves, I think, for media personalities, it's definitely something that I think in the short term kind of, hurts you. But I think long term, there are opportunities like, what we just saw this weekend with like all these incredible athletes like coming together and creating this thing that we all get weeks and months and years of content from, you know what I mean? And like continuing to build that out. But, just kind of like being in the room with them and just getting the vibe for those guys on what they do. Like, I don't think they go into it thinking like how we're thinking about it, right? Like, as far as like media and content, Jalen and Josh are the best term, just idiots, right? Like the way they crack jokes on each other, like, those people, like you grew up with those type of people. So like, even when you see it on the podcast, like it's genuine as hell. And
that's why it's a popular podcast, I think. Because it's everything about it is real.
Yeah. Like you literally, I mean, obviously you got to put certain parameters up as far as like ad reads and media and all that jazz. But the way they communicate with each other and talk with each other, you literally just have to throw mics on and just let them go. Like, you could have had like an incredible episode of Roommates just in that green room, like before we went on, with just the way that they talk to each other. So I don't know. I feel like, people that are super talented will always find ways to continue to create and be in this space that is relevant as well, and use the fact that our star athletes have, been in the content game and creating content that, we can all sort of benefit from, because it's just given us more access to their thoughts and their minds and how they believe and how they think the game. Like, you can't tell me, LeBron James putting out a podcast about how he thinks about basketball with a guy who will end up being his head coach isn't something beneficial for sports media, just for us to talk about, just for that to have happen. So I hear you on that, but I just always think like, okay, this is an opportunity just for us to continue to create and find new avenues to continue to do this.
I think everything you're saying to me is like, you should embrace it, because there's no choice but to embrace. Like, this is
we're
where
not going
we are
backwards, right?
Yeah,
like, we're not going backwards. There's not gonna be less podcasts. Like, there's gonna be,
no,
it doesn't seem like that's gonna happen. So it's like, all right, you can either feel a way about it or just figure out ways that it can benefit you, and in sense, continue to grow the medium.
One more on the panel, then I want to move on to something else before we finally get to the Knicks. You want to talk about different generations. Like, you got Clyde. I mean, Clyde's timeless because obviously he still calls the games, but like, he goes back to the 60s, and then you had kind of Spike from the 90s, and Ben has talked about how he came up as a fan in the 80s, and then he kind of went away for a while, and then now he's back, and then obviously Josh and Jalen. Was how cognizant were you of the fact that you had all these people? They all know each other, and like, they've obviously, Ben's been on the and Clyde's been on the Roommate spot, and I guess Spike too, right?
Yeah.
So, but were you thinking of like, do I need to tie all of these things together, or were you just like, here's a ball, go do what you got to do.
I mean, I definitely had like dozens more questions that I had to ask that I wanted to ask. But, you know, when you're in that live sort of environment, I think the best thing to do was give the people a good time and sort of like I had my bullet points, but like if there was something funny or there was something cool, like I would change it on a dime and be like, all right, Spike Lee just mentioned this. I have like 3 or 4 questions related to that. All right. Like make sure everybody gets a moment. Definitely start with Jalen. He's the new captain. Everybody wants to hear from him. He's probably the biggest star in New York next to Aaron Judge. Get him first, then hit Spike. He's literally, you know, if you look up fanatic in the dictionary, he might be in there. You know what I mean? So being able to touch that as far as like how he connects to athlete-fan relations in an event that's about athlete-fan relations, touch that. Ben, megastar, and being able to, and his just overall enthusiasm for this team is, we all see it on social media, but it's real. Like he legitimately will talk to you for hours just about how much he loves his team and how much he's grown up with it. Clyde is, you know, class personified, like the greatest color commentator in the history of sports, in my opinion. And Josh Hart, I knew Josh Hart was going to be funny. Josh Hart was going to have jokes. Like, so it was kind of like balancing all that out, but also knowing that I'm talking to Knicks fans. So they want to see how it connects to them. So it was making sure I had those questions that everybody could sort of answer and have different answers about. And of course, giving them something to look forward to with this upcoming season and the Boston Celtics and the Indiana Pacers and the Eastern Conference and, you know, Jalen's health and Mikal Bridges and all these other things. So it was a lot to tie into. I feel like we could have gone for another hour if they let us, but it was so much fun and truly one of the biggest honors of my career.
It's awesome that you got to do it.
Thank you.
Speaking of honors, I would imagine something else that you did recently was a pretty big honor. So obviously the very popular podcast, 7 p.m. in Brooklyn. You went on with the 2 hosts of that podcast who listeners of the show may be familiar with. Talk to me about it, man. I mean, like, I don't need to do any introduction. So what was it like going on with them? Man,
that was insane. I mean, the good folks at Wave Sports I've known for a long time, and they all do incredible work between PG's podcast and the Kelseys. And, you know, I've known about 7 p.m. in Brooklyn for a long time. So I was just always like, yo, man, if there's anything, you know what I mean? Like, I'm down. Like, this is my alley. Like Carmelo, I think a lot of people know me. Like, I've been a Carmelo fan since I was in high school, and he's only a couple years older than me. You know what I mean? Like, his Syracuse run was like something that like legitimately, you know, changed my fandom of college sports, and then just following his career. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, obviously, like there was Duke, Carolina, and all this type of stuff, but like Melo's Syracuse run, like, you got to remember, his freshman year, I was going into my junior year of high school. So like it was being able, like, that was, you know, I'm at St. Patrick's. I know a lot of these players. Like, I've played against a lot of these like high level dudes that either ended up in the NBA and all this type of stuff. So like, you knew who Melo was since like you were a freshman in high school. You know what I mean?
Sure,
like,
yeah.
so the primetime shootout was right, you know, like an hour and change away from us when they played against LeBron James. So
I remember that. I was watching. I'm a little older than you. I was in college when I was watching that one. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So so there you go. Right. So fast forward to, you know, this, you know, a couple weeks ago, and obviously Carmelo Anthony just coming off of, you know, Team USA getting the gold medal in the Olympics in Paris, and everybody seeing Melo's overall enthusiasm for the game and Team USA. Cool. And, you know, it almost had like this end of an era feel to this level of basketball with KD and Steph and Braun and Wade on commentary and all this type of stuff. So then to get the call to be like, yo, you know, we do 7 p.m. in Brooklyn all the time, and usually Melo's interviewing people, but everyone's going to want to hear Melo's point of view of this incredible Olympics run we just had. We would love for you to be in on this, to sort of like ask these questions and talk to them about it. I'm like, are you good? What else do you need from me? So get there, man. And it was an incredible experience, right? Like, it wasn't really anything I had to truly like, you know, totally prepare for, because we were all watching those games. We were all sort of like living and dying in the Serbia game and the France final and seeing Melo on the sidelines going crazy. So I was just trying to ask the questions that we all kind of wanted to know, like, what were you really saying? Like, was there a point in time where the players stopped listening to Steve Kerr and started listening to Coach Melo? Like, what about, this Olympic Games, especially the way FIBA's played, that made a player like you so incredibly proficient in that a lot of people aren't understanding as far as they're watching, like why these games are so close. Why aren't these NBA teams blowing them out? He just had a unique perspective on not just these specific games, but just FIBA basketball in general that I thought it was just so much fun to just sit and pick the brain of like a basketball genius like that. And the way he saw the game and the way he's, there's only a handful of people that are peers with LeBron James and peers with Stephen Curry and peers with Kevin Durant. And he's one of those guys. And on top of that, he was cool as hell, just being somebody who's only just started podcasting recently. Right. So he was awesome.
I think he's going to have a future. I don't know if he wants it, a legitimate future in media. I think to me, he seems cut out for it if he wants it. Maybe not like, at a Barkley Shaq level, like do it at the desk, like, a couple times a week. But I think I find him to be very engaging.
For sure. Even that, like just in the middle of that conversation, I got the feeling that like, if there's ever a time where Grant Hill doesn't want to head up USA basketball anymore, like I'm almost positive like Melo's going to be on the very top of that list of people to replace him. And whenever that time would come, I mean, all you had to do was just look at all the players going to salute him, during those crunch time moments. And obviously what he's doing with Cayenne, his son, and how he's coming up through the ranks. Like it's hard to see a world where Melo isn't heavily involved in the NBA, whether it's through media or whether it's through USA basketball or anything like that, because the level of respect he has for the game, I don't think really came through in his career, right? Like, I think people sort of had this unfair sort of stigma about him just because his name is Melo and he's a laid back sort of dude, right? But I think that interview and that podcast and, seeing how animated he was on those sidelines during the Olympics let people know just how much he truly cares for this game and how he could think it to a genius level like very few offensive players could. So it was really a good time, man.
I'm just thinking it would be a good podcast topic. Andrew, you're listening behind the scenes, write this down. The top 10 players for which there is the biggest discrepancy between how they are perceived within the league amongst other players versus how they are often talked about in whether it's the media or talked about by fans. I don't know if Melo's number one on that list, but he's definitely somewhere in the top 10. And I think he's probably in the top 5 because you look at how other players, like you mentioned, all the guys who were still on the team or like Wade on doing the commentary, like it just feels like he's at the highest level in terms of how they look at what he was able to do.
Yeah, I mean, all you got to do is look at those episodes of podcasts where they're saying who was the toughest person you've ever had to guard. And if it's not Kobe or MJ, like more than likely it's always Carmelo Anthony. And you can see them wince when they talk about it. It's like, oh man, guard him. Like they can still feel like the physicality of wanting to guard a dude that gifted and that strong. So yeah, like that's, back to your point about athletes in the media space, you don't get that sort of levity if these athletes aren't taking back their sort of, their narrative, so, and to be fair, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of people in media who aren't the most, the most astute as well. You know what I'm saying? Like we've grown up in an era with enough microphones to know some of those people definitely slipped through the cracks and definitely had their own personal agendas against certain players that got bigger than anybody had any right for it to be. So to think that, maybe there were some people out there that had agendas on a guy like Carmelo Anthony because of one thing or another, can't be that far-fetched.
I love how you put it like that, taking back the narrative. And it makes me wonder, like, everything's so polarizing, and like Melo, just like anybody else, you name any player, almost any player, and you could say like there's the camp of people who are all about that player, and then the camp of people who are going to be haters or whatever phrase you want to use. And I wonder if, just use Melo as an example, if him kind of going on the offensive. And again, like you say, trying to recapture the narrative. I wonder if that actually changes the minds of people who were already predisposed to say, he's overrated. He didn't do this. He didn't do that. I don't know. I want, because to me, it's like I could see people in that camp looking at it and being like, oh, he should, he's retired. Who cares what he's, he should, I don't know. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
I mean, Kevin Durant had the most, he's always a great follow because he always has some real, astute tweets to put out. And I think one of them, he says, and I'm paraphrasing here, he says, this is a fraternity and you're not part of it. Right. And at the end of the day, that's really what it boils down to. And in anybody's profession, whether you're a podcast host, an NBA player, you clean toilets, you run the presidency, whatever. If the people that do what you do have the utmost respect for you, that's usually all that matters. Everything else is gravy, right? Like everything else is like extra, in my opinion. Like if you're a podcast host and maybe people don't think you're the best podcast host, but the people who are great at podcasting think you're great at it, a lot of times that's all you really need. And I think that's what, guys like KD, guys like, I got to a big McGrady argument a couple of weeks ago on my social media where people were legitimately slandering Tracy McGrady, saying, I think there was a photo of T-Mac shooting a fadeaway with Kobe and Shaq guarding him. And I quote tweeted it saying, kids, don't let them forget about T-Mac. He was right there. And then people were like, right where? Kobe used to and then I would just look at their profile and see where they were born or what year. And I'd be like, okay, this explains everything. Because it's like, what are you saying? If you didn't see Tracy McGrady in his prime when he was carrying, a team that was supposed to have a healthy Grant Hill and probably supposed to have Tim Duncan, maybe we're talking about a couple of other teams that won championships and not just a Lakers led by Kobe and Shaq and the Spurs and all this type of stuff. Tracy McGrady, again, to people who just probably look at rings, which again is a team accomplishment. And if we're talking about specific players and how great they are, shouldn't diminish from them if they didn't win a team accomplishment, especially if you give a little lens to what happened in that team and some sort of context and not just say it is what it is. Then maybe we'd be a little bit more honest about the athletes that we cover and we love to watch. So, yeah.
I crap on social media a lot. It is good for this though, in that you talk about narratives over as years and decades go by. It's funny how, and I'm maybe not T-Mac yet because he's still kind of recent, but if you are not part of the narrative, right, the larger narrative, you kind of get weeded out. Yeah. And didn't matter how great you were. And we could go through some players from the 80s, maybe even the 90s, who just, again, we're now like 30 years. They don't fit snugly into the larger narrative and people just don't talk about them as much anymore. At least with social media, like you quote tweeted that, like at least that keeps up the conversation about T-Mac. And it should, because I don't know that I've ever seen a better, like in terms of like peak scoring barrage, who did it better than Chase? I mean, list of a couple of guys, if that.
Yeah, I mean, just watching the way T-Mac plays, he was just a slightly shorter Kevin Durant. Same moves, same hesitation threes, same ability to shoot over at the top of defenders. Like the ease in which he scored, that's the only thing you could really compare it to, right? Like, so yeah, man, it's just funny how that works out because it happens every generation. And we're just becoming the old guys in the room, right? Like when people start,
I'm proud of that.
Hey, I'm not fighting it. I can't fight it. Like you see the gray coming in my beard. Like it's here.
I shaved recently, but it
ain't going nowhere. So I just kind of embrace it. And it's been funny to sort of see us all turn into the old men yelling at clouds when we talk about the players of our generation, right? Like, it's just...
Listen, someone has to defend them, and I will. Like again, I'm more NBA of the '90s because I'm a little older than you, and I will always go down saying like Barkley and Ewing and shit. You know who's the guy I'm going to wind up? I promise you, we're getting to Knicks talk after this. The guy that I'm going to wind up, I'm going to die on the hill of defending him until I am can't like see straight anymore is Shaq. Because I feel like we're gonna keep advancing, and people are gonna nitpick and this and that. Only won one MVP, and we'd be like, no, I saw that man, utterly dominate everything, and I'm that's gonna be my hill.
That's crazy. It's crazy that's what's gonna come down to one of these. It's days, gonna happen. Right? Like Shaquille O'Neal. For anybody who saw him and the way the game was played, nobody played it like him before or afterwards. Like nobody. The game is even changed. Like they had to change rules to make him less effective, right? Like, and obviously we've become a stretch 4, stretch 5 world of basketball where it's just spread out so much more. But you take a little bit of a critical eye to some of his accomplishments, and then I could totally see a world where people are just like, oh well, Shaq, he's no Victor Wembanyama in like a day or two. You know what I mean? Like I feel like that's gonna happen, and so Shaq, I think he definitely was, man. I can't believe we got to explain that to kids, but it's gonna come a day.
Kids, that's what they are. Quick break to tell you about our new friends from BetUS. Are you looking for a new book this basketball season? BetUS is the answer. They have the fastest payouts in the industry. 125% sign-up bonus up to $2,000, 200% crypto deposit bonus. Fast and easy deposit and withdrawal process. Check out my BetUS link in the description below. You get 24/7 personalized service, 365 days a year, live wagering on all major games, the best betting variety in the business. You get 10% back on your net losses twice a year. And did you know that BetUS can give you your very own personal account manager? How about that? Okay. I'm going to bring up Andrew Claudio here because we are going to look at some current NBA odds. Hello, Andrew. How are you?
I'm good, John. How are you?
I'm okay. I don't know if you know this, but the NBA released the game schedule for all the in-season tournament games. So we know, for instance, when the Knicks are going to be playing the Hornets, Nets, Sixers, and Magic for their in-season tournament games. We're going to pick in-season tournament cup winners right now. I am looking at the odds here, which you can see as well. I don't like the Boston Celtics at plus 425 because KP is not going to probably play in any of those games. Some of these other teams, I'm not sure if the motivation is quite going to be there. Mavs just made the finals, Nuggets, recent NBA champion. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a homer. I'm going to pick the Knicks at plus 1,000. Those are tied for the 4th best odds. You know that Tom Thibodeau is going to be motivated to win every game his team plays. So why not? New York Knicks plus 1,000.
Love it. The defending champs of the NBA Cup, the NBA in-season tournament, are plus 2,600. So this may just be the thing that LeBron wins for the rest of his career. I like those odds a lot. You got to go with the defending Western Conference champions as well, especially since we just had Tim McMahon on the pod. Shout out to Dallas. They're plus 1,800. I'm tired of you doubting Luka Doncic, John Macri. Plus 1,800 for the Dallas Mavericks. I just love the value bet there.
Okay. I think those are two pretty good bets. Again, presented by BetUS. Use the link in the description and get 125% deposit bonus up to $2,000 for your first 3 deposits. Gambling involves risks. Please only gamble with funds that you can afford to lose. All forms of betting carry financial risk, and it is down to the individual to make bets with or without the assistance of information provided. Let's do a little Knicks talk before we get you out of here. So you were on with Jalen and Josh talking about the team this year and the obviously heightened expectations.
Yes.
The line I keep coming back to when I think about this year's Knicks team is the old Spider-Man line: with great power comes great responsibility. Like, this team has a lot on them. I keep looking at the over-under win totals and all the people predicting them to finish second in the East and everything, which I love it. I'm down for it. I just wonder, should we as Knicks fans be a bit worried that for the first time, really in earnest, they are the hunted, perhaps, as opposed to the hunter? I feel like there has been a slight shift they've gone up one more notch. What are your thoughts on that?
I say I like the view better here, right? Like I like the view of going into a season with expectations, with real a real ability to possibly win a championship, and even something good to take from an end of a season that didn't end in a championship, which is the rare thing to pull off in an NBA season, right? There's only one team that's happy at the end of the year, but you can make the argument that the New York Knicks are probably the only fan base that can be okay with how they lost last year. Like the way everything was just sort of exhausted until being one game away from the Eastern Conference Finals. You will take that 20 times out of 20 if that's how you're starting the season, especially with that 3/4 of your starting lineup. That being said, of course I think the trepidation only comes from them not living up to it, right? Like there's trepidation every season. Nobody wants their team to suck, right? But I think what you can do is take solace in the fact that there's been, incremental improvement every year during the Leon Rose regime. You could take solace in the fact that they have found players that people either discarded or didn't have much use for, or maybe was underpaid and have gotten more than market value for all of them and have outplayed damn near every single one of their contracts. You can take solace in the fact that they've developed players. Like this is a very good NBA franchise, which is a hard thing for longtime Knicks fans to come to grips with. Like we're still all waiting for the other shoe to drop. But if you look at it from I was watching Desperate Housewives with my lady, right? And the last scene with Tom and Lynette was Tom saying, when we were together, our problems looked this big because we were so close to them. But once you take a step back and look at it from a very macro point of view, these problems don't look that big. You were out without Julius Randle for damn near a third of the season and the playoffs. OG Anunoby has turned into a legitimate, possible borderline all-star, definite all-defensive player. You got Mikal Bridges. Josh Hart has become the Carmelo Anthony of Draymond Greens. Mitchell Robinson, if he's healthy, is at worst the second or third best defensive center in the league.
I'm down for that.
You got Tibbs. Tibbs ain't going to if there's anything you worry about Tibbs, maybe he plays our guy a little bit longer than you're comfortable with. But he's not going to be underprepared, right?
No, and his players will not be underprepared.
The development of players that they draft, the system, the franchise players, and then at the top of it all, you got a guy who was arguably the best point guard in basketball, leading your team, who is used to winning. There are worse places for a franchise to be than to be right here.
But you just nailed it. Winning is now an expectation with the Knicks, but not in the sense that I was describing it before, in the sense that these players come in and to quote I was a one-time Steelers fan. I've since become the most fair weather of Steelers fans, but I was diehard for a long time before I got really crazy. Anyway, Mike Tomlin, who I love Tibbs the most, but Mike Tomlin's like right there. He has a line where he says the standard is the standard, and it doesn't matter if there's a guy that goes out injured. Like whoever's coming into his shoes, like it feels like that's what last year's Knicks team embodied, as you were saying, like everybody that went down, and that's the spirit, that's the energy that they bring in to the season, which is why I feel like, are there teams that have more top end talent? Like, yeah, you can make the like even Philly, like with their big three, whatever. But I think the whole really is greater than the sum of the parts, more with the Knicks than pretty much any team in the league. And I don't know that we would have ever been able to say that about this franchise.
Yeah, I think a lot of these players in other situations probably aren't as important or as effective. But I think one thing you could definitely take solace in the fact in is that the last few NBA champions have banged on the door for a couple of seasons before it eventually knocked down. The Celtics, the Nuggets, the Bucks. I mean, the Warriors are the Warriors, but they're always around. Like, a lot of teams with top end talent, we're starting to notice like it doesn't really happen that quick. It doesn't happen like that. But a team like the Knicks, who have built steadily throughout the years, it almost seems like you really just need ducks to fall in the correct order for it to eventually lead to an NBA championship, which we saw with Boston last year, which we saw with the Denver Nuggets the year before. The Warriors obviously always in the mix, but the Bucks also sort of were in that mix of just knocking on the door for years until eventually knocking it down. So I think with that being said, this is a team that has been knocking on the door for a couple of years now. The door is the conference finals, but the thing with this Knicks team last year is there wasn't a single game that I saw them go into that I didn't think they had a chance to win. Like, there's no team out there. Like, why not the Knicks? Like, there's no team out there that's just so, unbelievably over the top better than these guys that I saw. I mean, I saw them watch the Denver Nuggets. I saw them watch the Minnesota Timberwolves. I saw them watch the Phoenix Suns. I saw them watch the Los Angeles Lakers. I saw them watch the Philadelphia 76ers. I saw them watch the Cavaliers, the Pacers, the Heat, everybody. And this is with 3/5 of their starting lineup not on the floor. The only team I didn't see them wash up, and I'm giving this to them because, yes, they beat the Celtics at the end of the year, but those dudes were playing Jalen Brunson full court, and they still could not stop him.
I watched that game, and they were trying for a half.
They will tell you all up and down that, they're just getting ready for the playoffs. No. They took it to their ass for 4 quarters, and they beat them. This New York Knicks team and those Boston Celtics, the NBA champions, if I'm a Knicks fan, I am salivating at the fact that they are the hunted because you get a crack at them 4 times a year. You could see up close and personal just how far you are from an NBA champion. It's literally and figuratively as close as you've been in the past several years. You get a litmus test 4 times this year to know exactly where you stand as an NBA championship favorite. On top of that, you got the roster, you got the coaches, you got the fan base. If not now, then when?
No pressure or anything. I was going to end by saying, well, you know what the nice thing is? All these guys are under contract for a while. It doesn't have to be this year. No, but I agree with you. There is a sense that this could be the year. I hope it is the year. And it's going to be very fun for obviously everybody in this area, but also for all of us who get a chance to cover it, including you. So why don't we end with that? Tell folks at home where they can hear you, find your stuff, anything you want to plug, promote before we get out of here.
Yeah, man, you can catch me on Fanatics Sportsbook app all season long, just talking hoops on there. Download it, check it out. You can catch me on my podcast, Say Less with Kaz, Loki, and Rosie. Music show with my boys and my homegirl. You can check it out on my YouTube page. If you'd like me talking wrestling, catch me on the Ringer Wrestling Show every Monday and Thursday on the Ringer, wherever you listen to your podcast. You can catch me on WWE Ultimate on Peacock, doing their show before every one of their big pay-per-view events. I think that's all my shows. I think that's them. I got a couple in the chamber that's coming soon, and I'll be back to plug those when the time comes. But thank you so much for having me on this podcast, man. I love listening to it. You do an amazing job just breaking down Knicks games and just the state of the fan base and everything like that. You and CP are guys I check for, faithfully. So keep doing what you're doing, man. And I really do appreciate being on here for real.
We're lucky to be able to do it. I'm incredibly lucky to get to have conversations like this because the respect goes 2 ways. I love everything that you're doing and excited to see, as always, what's around the corner, because it's all good and it's all, onwards and upwards. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I appreciate that, man. Thank you so much for having me. And hopefully we can do it again around when the season starts.
I was about to say, we'll get a little playoff preview coming maybe when we get into the season.
A little something.
Thank you for tuning in to the Knicks Film School Podcast. This episode was once again presented by BetUS.